Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about not one, two Taylor Swift records. I had missed the Speak Now re-recording release, Speak Now Taylor's version, when it released back in July of this year. And I had thought recently I should probably share my thoughts. I had originally planned on making a video, but it just wasn't a good time. It just didn't end up happening. But of course, now we have 1989 Taylor's version, which has just come out. And so I thought, why not share my thoughts on both records? Because I have shared my thoughts already on Fearless Taylor's version and Red Taylor's version. I actually also had an OG Red album review that I filmed back in 2017. I'm going to link all of these reviews in the description for anyone who is interested. But I had never reviewed Fearless before 2021, and I have never reviewed Speak Now or 1989 on this channel. So I've never talked about any of these songs. The only other Taylor Swift album that I have covered that came out back in her Big Machine era is Reputation. So I may, film another video about Reputation when her version comes out in the presumably near future. We'll talk a little bit about where we think Taylor's trajectory is for 2024 and beyond. This is going to be not just talking about 1989 and Speak Now. We're going to be talking about all things Taylor Swift. Well, we're going to be talking about 2023 and the rather incredible year that she has had. Though, let's be real, every year, especially since the pandemic, has been pretty incredible for her. There has just been milestones after milestones after milestones, and it just seems like she keeps topping herself. These streaming numbers for 1989 are looking incredible, and she's not doing a lick of promo, which is actually kind of blowing my mind. The allegations that Red is Taylor's favorite album definitely have some merit. She went crazy promoting Red, Taylor's version, 2 years ago. Fearless was the first re-recording, so it got a bit of buzz, but nothing compared to Red. And then Speak Now, no, not so much. But 1989 is getting like nothing. She's just putting out Instagram posts, and of course there's merch available. But it is very quiet compared to. I mean, she's not even currently on tour. She's in the hiatus period between the U.S. leg and the international leg of her Eras tour. And of course, we're going to be talking about the Eras tour, and we'll be talking about the Eras tour movie. So I feel like we'll start out by talking about the albums, get the music stuff out of the way, and then I'll talk more about all the other things that Taylor has been doing and my thoughts on them. So here we go with first rewinding back a few months, not that long ago. We had a really quick turnaround this time. Fearless and Red, it was about an 8-month. No, it wasn't 8. It was like 6 months. But a little bit quicker, 4 months or so, not even 4 months. I don't know, between 1989 and Speak Now. Speak Now came out in early July, and that was the third re-recording. So after that album came out, she was officially halfway through this re-recording process. And of course, now we have 1989. Now, Speak Now, which is an album, again, I've never talked about on this channel, is one of, if not my favorite Taylor Swift record, which is why I have to go back and talk about it. I've always kind of had a hard time deciding between Red and Speak Now. If you've watched my Red review, I talk about this. Some days I prefer Red, some days I prefer Speak Now, but I always love them both. I still think if we're talking about, now, of course, I also feel like the trifecta includes Folklore. I think Folklore is, if we're talking about the holy trinity of Taylor Swift records, I think Red, Speak Now, and Folklore are the holy trinity. I think that Fearless and 1989 for me are sort of also worthy of merit and pretty good records. I would put them in the top 5. And then all of her other albums, I'm afraid, would not be in the top 5, which I know is very controversial. But, we all have to have our favorites and least favorites, right? So anyway, Speak Now is a incredibly written record, and it is her entirely self-written album. So she wrote everything on the record. There was one song that is from that era, I believe from a deluxe edition of that album called If This Was a Movie, which she ended up releasing ahead of time with several songs, or I don't know, it was put with some other songs, like with some Hunger Games songs. it was sort of just released kind of out of the way so that the entire album of Speak Now, when she releases it, could be claimed to be self-written, because that was the only song that had a co-writing credit on it, which is incredible. You know, for Taylor, this was her third studio album. This album was originally released on, I believe, October 25th, 2010, I'd like to say. I'm usually good with album release trivia, so I'm getting pretty good at remembering not only the month and the year, but the actual date. And I believe that it is the 25th of October, but I may be wrong on that, in 2010. And I do remember when it came out. I was a senior in high school, and Taylor Swift was already a huge, big name. That's what I feel like some Gen Z Swifties don't fully appreciate. Taylor was very much, I remember when Mine came out. Every girl in my high school was talking about it. I'll admit, I wasn't, I was watching the music video. I was casually, kind of from afar, interested in the music, but I also at the time felt like Taylor Swift's music was not for me. It was this very kind of whitewashed, sanitized pop country girl image that, at the time, as a 17-year-old gay kid who's, as an artist who's coming up in the art scene, I felt like she was a little too conventional, too country for my taste. And boy, did it change when Red came out. And I finally kind of went back and was like, Speak Now is a masterpiece. There really isn't a song on the 13 tracks of the standard edition that I would consider a real skip, which is why I think it edges out Red for me in a lot of ways, because I do believe Red has some skips. Red could definitely be trimmed down as a record, which is one of the flaws it has. Whereas Speak Now, out of those 13 songs, honestly, I wouldn't necessarily get rid of any of them. If I had to say what my least favorite song is, well, there's two ways I can look at this. If we're talking about sonics, I would have to say Better Than Revenge. Better Than Revenge is the most Paramore-esque song on the record. It's the most rock song on the record. And I still think it's a good song, even sonically, even though it's not as melodic. But I think that perhaps lyrically, my least favorite song on the record, and that's hard. I don't really think lyrically any of the songs on the record are bad. Now, of course, speaking of Better Than Revenge, she did change one of the lyrics. She's best known for the things that she does on the mattress has been changed, which is kind of slut-shaming. Like, people are construing it that way. She turned it into, he was a moth to the flame, she was holding the matches. Which, fits the song like a glove. I think you don't really even notice it too much. But, I know some Taylor Swift fans, especially, like some OG fans and perhaps maybe some more conservative fans of hers, are sort of like, why are you, bowing down to this overly woke kind of idea? And I do think, I brought up Paramore just now. Paramore's found themselves in a similar predicament with their song Misery Business. Once you're a whore, nothing more, that'll never change. I believe that's the lyric. Hayley Williams has admitted that she doesn't it's more her almost self-canceling herself. If anything, I think it was more, the band speaking up about it, or Hayley speaking up about it, not so much the fans being like, you need to address this. But, I think Hayley was like, I don't like singing the song, and I don't particularly like that lyric. But I think she's come around to it now. I think that was more like, 8-10 years ago when Paramore was really trying to make amends for it. I personally, I'm not a woman, and I respect and understand both sides of the argument, so I'm not really here to claim what's the right thing to do here. But I must admit, I do believe that there's a fine line with art and censorship, and I also kind of feel like, my personal opinion, why can't Taylor call out a woman? And, she's pretty scathing to her ex-lovers. So it's very rare that Taylor ever has any vitriol towards another female in a song. And I'm not saying that, oh my gosh, it's about damn time she flipped the script. I'm just saying, I don't know, Taylor originally wrote it. Keep in mind, Taylor was about 18 years old when she was writing a lot of these songs. That's how she felt, and so, I don't know, her censoring herself, it's not what I would have done, but I also understand why Taylor decided to change the lyric. Taylor is trying to please everyone, and it's such an inconsequential change. I mean, come on. But it is an instance in this first time ever of the re-recording process that she's made a significant songwriting change. All the changes have so far been in the production, and they have been very minuscule. And I will say that I do think Speak Now, Taylor's version, to me, sounds just as good as the original. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about 1989, because I do believe that Taylor is working with a producer on these re-releases that is better suited for country rock sound, not so good with the kind of Max Martin-esque pop stuff. And we'll talk about that when we talk about 1989. Christopher Rowe is the big producer on all of the originally released tracks, the tracks that, Jack Antonoff and Aaron Dresner didn't have anything to do with, because this was before she started collaborating with them. So she hires them out for the vault tracks, which I think is a smart move. I'm liking that she's not taking, some of these household producers and sort of reworking her old albums and their sound. Again, for 1989 and for Speak Now and Fearless and Red, that would be a mistake. It's just a shame that she can't get back and work with Nathan Chapman. Nathan Chapman produced Speak Now and Fearless, and I believe a lot of Red, before she started working with other people like Max Martin, Dan Wilson, Shellback. But the thing is, I don't think Christopher Rowe and Nathan Chapman are coming from opposite ends of the spectrum. I think they work just fine together, Christopher Rowe's version, Nathan Chapman's version of the production. It's not bothering me. So with that being said, the 13 songs all sound amazing. I think in the re-recording process, we obviously have Taylor's slightly more matured vocals. This album was recorded quite a while ago, originally, so she has matured a lot. Her voice has deepened a little bit, but she is still honoring the originals. She's not making too many crazy changes. And I think the production sounds as crisp and kind of enveloping as it needs to. I feel like it is kind of like going from low res to high def to a certain extent. I think that there's a crispness to the guitars, and I think that the album, it works. It works for me. So I knew I wasn't going to have a problem. I figured, since Fearless and Red, for me, Red had problems with some of the more single pop tracks. But with the country hits, I wasn't really worried about Christopher Rowe and his. Whoops! I just kicked the camera. I wasn't so worried. So we'll talk about it in 1989, but production becomes a bit more of an issue there. So, Speak Now deserved Album of the Year. I'm going to be honest with you. I understand Fearless. Fearless was her breakout record, but I would have given Album of the Year to Speak Now. I personally feel like Speak Now could have deserved it. I'm perfectly fine with Fearless. I also think Red deserved Album of the Year. But Fearless was, after Fearless, they felt like they wouldn't want to give Taylor all these accolades for a similar sounding album, and it wasn't until 1989 that she won Album of the Year again. Yeah, what else can I say? First of all, my favorite album cover of Taylor's is the OG album art. I was really interested to see how her take on it was going to be for this album, and honestly, I still like it. I really do. I like the deep purple in the background contrasting the dress, and I do kind of like that there's still a extravagance to her hair and the dress, the bit of it that we can see. I do wish that there was a little more of the dress on display. If you see the Eras Tour movie, by the way, the sad thing, and I have not seen the Eras Tour movie. I have not attended the Eras Tour. I have seen lots of video footage of the tour on YouTube, though. And I have seen her perform the Speak Now section. But what's so sad to me is that the Speak Now section on the Eras Tour is pretty much just Enchanted. And then whatever surprise song, she did perform Sparks Fly on the night she announced Speak Now, Taylor's version. And then she's been doing surprise songs from Speak Now. But really, the staple song from that era is pretty much just Enchanted. And I really would love to see her throw in a few other songs like Mine or Long Live. Long Live is the other part of it, and Long Live, and I would argue Long Live and Enchanted are the two best songs on that record, so I'm sort of getting ahead of myself here, but I suppose I might as well jump to the, conclusion here that I believe that Enchanted is probably Taylor Swift's best song, and not just on Speak Now, I mean entirely of her oeuvre. And especially after hearing the re-recording, it really stuck with me just how magical that song is. And I know a lot of fans love it. It's criminal that it never got a music video. It never became a single. The album was originally going to be called Enchanted, but I believe her label kind of intervened and said, you know what, let's go with Speak Now instead, which was another song on the record. I don't have a problem with Speak Now being the album title, but Enchanted would have been a phenomenal album title as well. I don't know if maybe she felt like there was already a movie. There was already a movie called Enchanted and didn't want it sounded kind of cliche. Why the label ultimately didn't go with that. Because Speak Now was never a single either. But the big singles, Mine, Mean, and Back to December. Mine, as I already said, the lead single was a perfect, I think, follow-up for what she was doing on Fearless. And it definitely ushered in an album where you're like, yeah, sonically, she's not going to be experimenting too much, but the songwriting is only getting bolder. The songwriting is only getting deeper. And you could tell even with the intro track of Mine. She's singing about things that are way above her age level at the time. I always felt like Mine was being sung slightly from the perspective of someone more in their mid to late 20s, not someone who is 18 to 19 years old. So I think that is pretty amazing. But, I guess I grew up kind of late, and 18 to 19-year-old is an adult. But when I was 18 to 19, I didn't feel like one. So, and I wasn't dealing with the kinds of problems living on my own that the people in this song are dealing with. You made a rebel of a careless man's careful daughter is one of those ubiquitous plastered on the wall Taylor Swift lines. I mean, the fact, again, I really just love that this album is entirely her, no other outside influence on the writing. So Sparks Fly leaps off the page. It's electric. It's again taking Fearless up a notch. Back to December. It's really interesting. Back to December. I worked at Bob Evans about a decade ago. It's this sort of like country buffet kind of restaurant, kind of frequented for old people. But I loved going there as a kid. So it's like a families and like older person restaurant. It's very white. It's very, well, not really. In the area I live, it was, but it can be, but they played Back to December quite a lot. And I also referenced this in my Kylie Minogue video because it's the same Bob Evans. They also played Can't Get You Out of My Head, which, for the Bob Evans I worked at seemed a little out there, even though that's a ubiquitous hit that's played everywhere as well, and at every grocery store. But Back to December, that opening guitar had just, I felt like I was falling asleep and I could hear it. And I wasn't I was listening to Taylor at the time like that, but I wasn't deeply listening to Taylor that much. And so Back to December was a song I wasn't really checking for, but that experience made it kind of lodged forever in my psyche as it's taking me back to specifically 2014 and working at that place. And I've heard it in other jobs I've worked before, but nothing like the amount of times they played it back then. And Taylor gets melancholy just right on all of these guitar ballads. And this is an album of guitar ballads. I mean, we've got Dear John, which is almost a 6-minute song. I think it's just a little under All Too Well's length. But it's the prototype track 5 for All Too Well on Red. Track 5s are sort of among Taylor Swift lore, the kind of pinnacle of deep personal songwriting and balladry. And boy, does she, Dear John is about John Mayer. What's interesting is in 2010, there was a movie called Dear John that I actually remember seeing in theaters, and I believe it had Channing Tatum in it. So I wonder if she'd seen that movie when she wrote the song. But obviously, a lot of these songs are about her time that she dated John Mayer in 2009. And it is a scathing song. It is a scathing song. I remember, people talking about, John Mayer better beware. But I think it needed to be sung. I mean, you're hearing Taylor talks about how Speak Now was an album where she is transitioning into adulthood and she's having to sort of say goodbye to childhood. And it's a hard thing. And she moved to an apartment on her own and she just felt like the world was so less inviting as, it always seems as a kid. And you just sort of are like, I'm not ready for this. And there's such vulnerability on this record. You've got Never Grow Up, which is sort of like talking to a younger version of yourself, basically, and the inner child. And, giving wise words of, enjoy it while you got it, because it's a rough world out there as an adult. And it's a beautiful sort of sister song to the Best Day on Fearless. Obviously, Mean is, a perfect sort of, in a very masculine kind of macho genre of country music, honky tonk country music. I like that she takes a fiddle kind of country song and scathily attacks men on it. Men who deserve it. Mean is iconic for that. Obviously, the story of, all these songs are just amazing. Last Kiss is one of the most tragic on the record. It's so beautiful. And then Long Live, which closes it out. It was the end of the decade, but a start of an age. That song came out in 2010, so that was very telling. And it's probably the best tour closing song Taylor could, use. And of course, it doesn't close her Eras tour, but it did come as the end of the Speak Now section, which again was only really 2 songs. And apparently Long Live was cut out of the movie version, and a lot of fans are very upset. I believe a studio version of Long Live plays during the end credits of the movie, but that's a studio version, not the live version. So that's kind of criminal. Certain songs were cut for the Eras Tour movie that just released in theaters. I have a sneaking suspicion that they'll be added back in when they go on streaming. It's just to cut the movie down a little bit for the theater experience, but we'll see. We've got we've actually only got 2 bonus tracks, because if this was a movie, like I said, was sort of shoehorned into another era, because Taylor was like, that has a songwriting credit, that's not mine. We have Hours, which I had actually never listened to before the re-release of this album. And then Superman. And Superman reminds me of another job I worked when I worked retail. And, again, it's sort of like, oh, that's that song. I wondered what Taylor Swift song that was. I'd never actually sat down and listened to it until Taylor's version came out, but I'd heard the song quite a lot. And I've seen it got the lowest number of streams on streaming when Speak Now came out. And I thought that's kind of unfair, but I also kind of understand, Speak Now is such a stacked album, can understand Superman is not a fan favorite. I think it has a wonderful melody. So it's got a soft spot for me, but like I said, it has a bit of nostalgia because it reminds me of working at an arts and crafts store, as much so many of these songs do. So then we have the vault tracks. Now, here's where things get a little spicy, and wait till we get to 1989. I gotta be real with you. The vault tracks have been disappointing me. I'd say I think Red has probably the strongest overall vault out of all of the albums she has given us, but I would argue Speak Now is second. I'm pretty happy with the Speak Now vault, but I think the worst is Electric Touch with Fall Out Boy, along with, it really hurts me to say this, but Castles Crumbling featuring Hayley Williams. It's a real shame, but I do think I blame Jack Antonoff on this one. But I also think that the song is just very muted sonically. A lot of people thought this song was written slightly, post, in the Reputation era, because it's singing about when fame kind of, when you're so when everyone starts to hate you, basically. But people forget that the Kanye VMA situation really shook her. And so as a 19-year-old going through that, it really did, cause her to kind of be like, oh God, am I bringing drama that is not serving me? People shouldn't be around me because I'm not worthy. It's like a very self-deprecating song. And Hayley is, I don't know, Hayley could have been better utilized. It's a little bit of a shame. I was very excited for this collaboration, but it was very underwhelming. But all of the other vault tracks I'm pretty happy with. I would say my next least favorite would be Timeless, but I do think that it's a beautiful song, all things considered. I Can See You, which is the one that got the music video treatment, is a naughty, risque song for Taylor. And it's a rockier kind of track. It's, again, not my favorite, but I see the appeal. But then Foolish One has the melody, and the vocalizations that I find just so homegrown Taylor. And it definitely is one of the songs that I think, I don't want to say is immature in its lyricism, but it definitely is something you can tell an 18, 19-year-old wrote. Whereas, some of these other vault tracks, you might be like, is Taylor just writing these songs today and pretending she wrote them in the past? No, you can tell by a lot of these songs, and Foolish One is clear. I mean, can't we all relate to Foolish One? I mean, I am still waiting by the mailbox for Letters of Love that will never come. Like it's just the tale as old as time for me. But my absolute favorite is When Emma Falls in Love. I absolutely adore this song. The rolling piano, the upbeat, jovial, hopeful energy. The melody just leaps off the page. And it feels very reminiscent of that era for her. And it's just chef's kiss. I think that the idea of Emma being perhaps an allusion to a Jane Austen character or just a general character, a female character, it doesn't have to be a specific reference to something, I think is a wonderful way of a device for Taylor to explore her own sort of feelings about a relationship, where she's sort of taking it out of the narrative of her own life and placing it on this other person, and telling a story that is very relatable to all of us. So, and When Emma Falls in Love is the standout vault track. And I've been listening to it quite a lot over the last couple months. Aaron Dessner, I keep wanting to say Dressner. Aaron Dessner is wonderfully matched for Taylor on that track. So yeah, Speak Now, I would say, re-recorded and of course in the OG form. I actually have Speak Now on CD. I bought it not long before she announced the re-recordings. I bought CDs like kind of in a big binge at one point. And I do wish I had Taylor's version now, because I sort of am like, oh, I don't know if I can listen to this CD, but it's more important that you don't stream the stolen versions. If you burn your old CDs to your computer, you're not giving, Scooter Braun any money. So now let's fast forward and talk about 1989. Boy, I've spent a lot of time talking about Speak Now. Well, to be honest with you, as I've already said, 1989, I think, is a stellar record, and I definitely think it's deserving of Album of the Year. But personally, I don't know if I would give it to it. But I don't know. In that year especially, I'm not opposed to it. But I will say that 1989, with the production, has some more problems. Now, 1989 is a record full of songs we've all heard before. I mean, Shake It Off, Blank Space, Bad Blood, which interestingly, Rolling Stone ranked as the worst Taylor Swift song, which actually is the fair. I think I wouldn't necessarily put Bad Blood at the very bottom, but I certainly would not put it in the top half of the list. I would put it towards the bottom for sure. I definitely prefer the version without Kendrick. Nothing against Kendrick. I just wasn't speaking to me as much. But that being said, 1989 is an interesting record. It's an album that's about sonically the 80s. Taylor was, of course, born at the tail end of 1989, so I always thought it was a little strange that she was claiming the entire year when she was born on December 13th. She had a little over, like, maybe 16, 17 days in 1989, but it's also about the 80s. So the sounds are heavy synth pop, 80s drums. You do hear it. You do hear it. I actually think it's a sound that she sort of stuck with and never fully deviated from, except in various sort of more urban areas on Reputation. But when Taylor has done pop, it has always sounded 1989-esque to me, at least as far as like Lover is concerned and other songs on Reputation. But yes, 1989 is probably her best pop album that she has made to date. As you know, I'm a little bit more of a country Taylor fan, which is ironic because I actually don't love country music in that way. I prefer pop music, but I recognize country when it's done well. And I have an ear for melody and, wistful songwriting. So country Taylor, folk Taylor usually wins out. But that's not to say that 1989 isn't a well-written record. Out of the Woods has immaculate storytelling. Style is just such a transportative song, both sonically and lyrically. And it is my favorite song on the record. So Style is sort of the Enchanted for me of 1989. I'd say my least favorite song on 1989 might be on the standard version, I Wish You Would. Even above Bad Blood, because Bad Blood is catchy and fun. I Wish You Would for me, I get it, but I don't feel like I need to listen to it too much. It's purely a sonic thing. It has nothing to do with the lyrical content. I Wish You Would just has the least grabbing melody on the record, but it is still, I wouldn't call it a skip, like a real skip for me. I just, because it's it's a shorter record. It feels like doesn't overstay its welcome. I actually love How You Get the Girl. I think because of its country nods, it sort of is a nice little element in the album that's very synth. And that's a lot of people's least favorite song on the record, so that's why I'm bringing it up. But it's not mine. But 1989, of course, is a Max Martin and Shellback record. Now, Max Martin, apparently, he's been a little bit stingy with song. Well, apparently, the tea is that Taylor doesn't want to work with him because Max Martin requires he gets songwriting credits on songs that he didn't write, even if he worked on other songs, and people are saying that Taylor doesn't believe in that. But from my understanding, there's a disconnect here about what songwriting is. I think some people are forgetting that producing a song is often a part of songwriting. Songwriting is not just writing lyrics, it is also composing the melody and coming up with the instrumentals. So there's a blend, it's a murky blend between songwriting and producing. And Taylor and all of her collaborators often exist in that blend when you have this sort of collaborative project. So I don't actually think it's controversial for Max Martin to want his credit when he's worked as a producer on the song or contributed any sort of idea to it. So I think Taylor, I don't know. I think if that's the reason, that's a real shame. But I also heard a rumor that Max Martin is not too fond of this re-recording idea. I think he thinks of himself as a little above it, and I think he doesn't really want anything to do with it, which is kind of I don't know, it's a little understandable. He thinks it's a waste of time, but I think that's kind of sad. I mean, ultimately, Taylor, how much money do you need to give him? Because, he is the top pop producer in the world. So he is going to be probably the most expensive to work with. But Taylor is one of the richest musicians currently working. So, I mean, if anyone can afford Max Martin, it's Taylor. But I think that, I don't know, she hasn't worked with him in like 8 years now, 7 years. I don't think I don't know, I don't think she wants to go back. And we'll talk about that in a bit with Jack Antonoff. But I will say this: his lack of production on this record, his lack of finesse with some of his pop songs is noticed. Style is a song that a lot of fans are calling out for saying it sounds nothing like the original. The other is New Romantics. Those are two songs that a lot of fans are saying don't sound nearly as good as the originals. New Romantics, I don't really hear it so much. I listened to both versions, and I really didn't want to do that too much because it's like, I don't want these re-recordings to be a compare it game too much because it's like, no matter how it sounds, I want to erase the old ones, right? It's like a political statement. But once you start listening to both, you start going, oh, I kind of might prefer this little part of this one, but I like this on this one. It's like you can't be happy with everything. It's true. There are certain aspects of the OG of Style that I prefer. For example, the reverb. I think there's a slightly the echoes are stronger. There's a slightly more enveloping sound to it. But I also think that there's a crispness to the re-recordings. And a lot of people say the guitars sound muted, but to me, they just sound a little crisper. I don't really think that they're too far in the background into the mix, but the guitars are important. And when I kept hearing about that, I was really worried. But no, all in all, I don't really have a problem with either of these songs. I don't really have a problem with any of the production on the standard edition or deluxe tracks on this record. My problems with the production go entirely to Jack Antonoff with the Vault tracks. So we'll get to that. But I do just want to throw that out there. I think Style, I hear the difference, but it's not enough to really bother me. The lack of reverb is kind of sad, but there's still enough where I'm just like, I can get used to this. It's such a phenomenal song, though. It's because we love it all so much that we're like so protective of it. But otherwise, yeah, for the most part, the rest of the album, I actually prefer Welcome to New York. I just think that the bass and the synth is calling my name a little bit more in this re-recorded version. So there are elements that have improved. I also want to give a huge shout out to my girl Imogen Heap. She was a collaborator that was more than happy to work with Taylor over a decade later. And of course the closing track, which is a collaboration with Imogen, that Taylor and Imogen working together was just never something I ever foresaw, but I think it's amazing. You can hear Taylor's background vocals on the song, and you can also hear kind of Imogen's style of chords and production. It's a very ambient and sparkling song. I think that it has even more shimmer to it in the recorded version. And so I'm actually impressed. There's more of a twinkle to the synths. So I am very happy with the re-recorded version, better than the original. Another standout from 1989 is this Love. Love that track. I do think it's very interesting that both Wildest Dreams and This Love came out like 2 years ago. I don't quite understand why Taylor for 1989 did give us a few songs in advance, and they weren't the lead singles like Shake It Off or Out of the Woods. No, they were songs that were deep cuts on the record. The Wildest Dreams was a single back in 2015. And so I do find it very interesting that those songs, I mean, Wildest Dreams, I think we got over 2 years ago, which is like crazy to think about now. And then I think we got This Love in 2022. So I guess it was at the time just sort of, I think she was frustrated with her lawsuit and how long it was taking for the 1989 re-release. And so she was like, well, I've got some of these songs done. Why don't I just give them to the fans while we have to wait? And now, of course, we have the whole thing. 3 bonus tracks that came out in 2014. We've got Wonderland. We've got You Are in Love. And we have New Romantics. Now, New Romantics is always going to be beloved by the fans and by myself. New Romantics is my favorite bonus track on one of my favorite songs from the 1989 era. I also really like Wonderland. I think Wonderland actually grew on me listening to Taylor's version. You Are in Love was, again, the least streamed song from 1989, similar to Superman back when Speak Now came out. And of course, there's got to be a song at the bottom. That's just how the cookie crumbles. I'm totally in agreement that I think You're in Love is not my favorite song out of the vault or out of the deluxe. So I'm totally okay with it. It was interesting because I saw someone say on Twitter that they felt like 1989 was more of a situationship record. I wouldn't agree with that. There are a couple songs where I could see where she's coming, where this tweeter is coming from, but I would call Reputation more of a situationship record. I think there's a lot more sort of floundering in the dark with relationships on Reputation, whereas 1989 has, again, a lot of proclamations of love, a lot of proclamations of, monogamous, steadfast, one and done, like, this is how I want to do it. I mean, we have You Are in Love. We have This Love. I mean, how could you call this a situationship album? I mean, you have Call It What You Want on Reputation. That is the most situationship kind of esque sounding title, right? Even though that song is a kind of prophetic love song, I don't know. It was an interesting thing I saw, and I was like, I don't exactly agree. But with that being said, love 1989 up until we get to the vault tracks. Oh, Lord. This is where Swifties might want to turn off this video. I've seen some general consensus that these are not the cream of the crop from the vault of the 4 albums we've gotten so far. But I still see a lot of Swifties gobbling them up. But this is going to get into a conversation that I think is a little bit more about Taylor in general right now, and her style that she seems to have honed in on, working with Jack Antonoff. All of the songs on the in the vault are at least partially produced by him, and it is very obvious because all of these songs sound like they come from Midnights, at least in terms of the production. I'm not talking about songwriting. I'm talking about because one person pointed out if Taylor wrote a lot of these songs today, there would be more curse words. And that's true. I mean, there's a song called Slut with an exclamation point that Taylor was originally going to put on the record and it was going to replace blank space. I am so glad she didn't do that. Though then again, Slut might have been a better song if it had been produced by Max Martin and Shellback. I would have really loved to have heard what they would have done with the song. Certainly given it more of a backbone because Jack Antonoff seems to not be able to find one. I don't want to turn this whole section of the video into an anti-Jack Antonoff thing, but girl, you need to find a new producer. You need to find a new producer. You need to work with someone else. A lot of my favorite musicians do tend to work with the same people, and I can critique them for it. But sometimes it fits like a glove, and it's almost like, I don't know if it's that imperative that they try something different. But in Taylor's case, it is very imperative, especially since she is putting out so much music. I mean, Midnights feels like the era that's just never ended. We got the 3 a.m. edition, then we got the Till Dawn edition in the spring, and we still have one song that has not come on streaming, that it may never will, that is still from that era. I mean, the era just keeps going, and we have songs after song, and Midnights is like this huge album. And then we have the Vault tracks, and Jack Antonoff is on a lot of those as well. And it's just too much of the same sound of song, same type of production. Jack Antonoff really, really likes his heavy, heavy synth bass. He really likes to have sparse clicks and beats. He really likes to hollow out her vocals to the point where it sounds like she's shouting. I feel like there's so many instances where I just want to reverb her vocals because Jack really, I don't know how to explain it because I am not a musical engineer and I don't know the way to describe this. Forgive me, but there's something that he does to her vocals that I noticed she didn't used to have on her voice. It's an indie sound. It is an indie sound. I noticed it on some other indie records. From other indie artists. And it's not really, in places it's okay, but all the time, no. Let's hear the full, sonance of Taylor's vocal. Let's not compress it. Let's not, muffle it in the background so that it weakens it. I also think that, of course, people point out that Jack Antonoff is sort of a servant of Taylor, and he's always servicing her vision, not the other way around. Even though I think the two are very keyed in on what the vision is, I think it's partly both of their visions. It's a collaborative effort. But Jack Antonoff works with Lana Del Rey, and I don't so much have a problem with his production on her music, because I think Lana Del Rey really, guides the ship on most of the songs. But I feel like Taylor, I don't know if it's her decisions that are kind of puzzling to me or if she's just letting Jack, infiltrate her musicianship too much. There's something that Taylor likes to do melodically that I've noticed, and I was really picking up on it while listening to this. She likes to, and again, this is where I think Taylor is a really, really good poet, but I don't know if she really has an ear for melody anymore. She likes to rush her lyrics into melody lines that don't have the space for them. And then what ends up happening is you've got a bit of a melody, but then you've got a lot of like it becomes uneven and kind of clunky and clumsy. She also really loves to use her lower register with Jack Antonoff. That's something I feel like, I don't know, Jack Antonoff, I mean, it's a quieter sound he's always going for. If she does have those shouts, like in Cruel Summer, they're very muted into the background. But I do think that she really likes to kind of like hover her voice in the throat. And, a bit of that's fine, but it's starting to just become this warbling, kind of droning, endless melody that never goes anywhere. And so I have such a problem with all these Volt tracks. Literally none of them are sonically really elevating at all. The two that I would argue are the best would be Say Don't Go, which is the one that has Diane Warren on it. Diane Warren is a songwriter, not so much a producer. So, I mean, again, lyrically, I don't really have anything to say that's too negative beyond the fact that I think that Taylor doesn't house her melodies within lyrics very well. She has great lyrics, not faulting her there. It's the melody that strings them together that I have a problem with, and the rhythm of that melody. But I also think that, Taylor often feels constrained by melody. I feel like in a lot of these songs, it's like she's not even trying. And that's something I've talked about on Midnights. It's the same exact problem. So all of these songs sonically do not fit 1989 at all. That's what's so frustrating. Because I can be down for Midnights having a distinct sound. It might not be for me, but I respect it. But don't infiltrate that onto albums that were made a decade ago before you even really. I mean, Jack Antonoff technically was on a few tracks on 1989. I believe he was, get this, my two least favorite songs of 1989. He was the one on. I Wish You Would and You Are in Love. I didn't even know that, but it makes so much sense. Isn't that sad? Why do I have something against Jack Antonoff? I don't like his sound. I really don't like his sound. Why couldn't she have worked with Ryan Tedder again? I Know Places is phenomenal. Oh my God. I Know Places is just, I don't think that, I was really expecting for Volt tracks, I was expecting a couple to be a little bit more down tempo and kind of slow and sort of minimal, but I was not expecting for such an upbeat sort of party album to have such sleepy Volt tracks that are so. I mean, it's like night and day. I mean, we need cathartic melody. We need like anthemic pop. It's just begging for some Max Martin, Shellback, and Ryan Tedder. Like it's just really sad that she's trusting Antonoff with too much of this. Like, girl, you need to work with someone else. So yeah, my favorite is Say Don't Go. Say Don't Go sounds the least Jack Antonoff-esque out of these 5 songs. I think it's interesting that she only put out 5 and not 6 like she has for all her other vaults. But you know what? Now that we know how they sound, I'm okay with there not being a 6th. There didn't even need to be these 5 because honestly, most of them I just don't feel any need to add to my library. I just don't feel like listening to them again after a few times. I would say Is It Over Yet is my second favorite. And I believe that's the one that will be sent to radio. So I'll be interested to see if she gives a music video to any of these Vault tracks because so far she has to all of the albums so far, except no, she didn't for Fearless, did she? No, she didn't for Fearless as well. Okay, well, I don't know if she's going to snub 1989, a Vault track music video. Probably won't, but we'll see. She's not really doing a lot with this record right now, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I mean, yeah. I again, props to the songwriting. I do think the concept of slut is, I understand why her label was kind of pulling her back from putting out a song with that word back in 2014. That would have been, this was before Taylor ever dropped the F bomb or even the, D word on a song. So this would have been a big deal. But for a song called Slut, that is the most sleepy, boring, basic element melody you could come up with. There's a little bit of Lana Del Rey-esque production in the background that makes it a little jazzy, but I don't know. It's not servicing the concept. And I mean, I was kind of expecting something that sounded a little bit more like Blank Space or Bad Blood. Something that is just a little more in your face. So I think a lot of the fans were. So yeah, isn't that funny? Those 2 songs I hate on this record. I don't hate, but I don't like are the ones with Jack Antonoff, and then she ends up working with him for the majority of her career moving forward. Quite sad. So with that being said, I prefer Speak Now, and I've always preferred Speak Now, but 1989 is a proper record. I mean, don't get me twisted. It's a phenomenal record, top 5. If you have 1989 as Taylor Swift's best album, I'm not going to side-eye you. I'm not. I understand. Like, it's her pop Bible. It is her sort of blackout, to comparison to Britney. So 1989 is a statement record. I think it's interesting that the album cover has 1989 written on it when none of the other Taylor's version records have text. I wouldn't have put at least Taylor's version. I know that if you're going to put any text, you might as well put everything in the text. But it's a little strange. I mean, having 1989 written in Sharpie, as if on a Polaroid, I think is serviceable to the concept and important to have on both versions. But I do like the cover. I do like the cover. People are saying that the 1989 cover is one of their favorite album covers. I gotta be honest. I'm not that personally. I'm not that attached to it. It's giving me like Instagram filter from 2013, and you know how we all look back on those photos and go, God, that filter is so like urine saturated. Like the sepia tones are too much. That's how I feel when I look at the 1989 Polaroid from the original. I'm like, where is the high definition? Where is the crisper, fuller realized color? And I think the beachy color is I'm reminiscent of this because it's a New York album, but it's also a Montauk album. It's also a Long Island album. It's a Coney Island album. So there's beach, but it's New York beaches. So I think it's a very distinct kind of theme for the record. So it's not tropical. So yeah, so overall, I'm excited to hear what Reputation's going to be like, but I'm also nervous because Jack Antonoff had even more hand on Reputation. And with maybe a few songs like Call It What You Want, I did enjoy, but a lot of his songs on that album I don't. And I prefer the Max Martin and Shellback ones. So it's going to be really tricky for me to see how that all. And of course, is Christopher Rowe going to be producing that record? I don't know. I don't know how that's going to necessarily sound. Um, and then, of course, there's Debut, which presumably is going to be her final re recording. I do think it is possible that we may wait quite a while for that. There's a possibility the Reputation might come out in 2024. That's what people are speculating. But I feel like both Debut and Reputation coming out in 2024 is possible, but I wouldn't bet money on it because I feel like Taylor might want to start working on another record, and that's going to sort of overshadow when she finally gets to Debut. I feel like it is good that she's picking up the pace on these re-recordings, but this gets me to the final topic of this video. It's a bit of a catch-22. I want her to be done with these re-recordings because I think she feels it this way too. Let's just get this done, and the sooner we get these re-recordings out, the less money the OG versions are going to make. It's kind of imperative that these get done sooner rather than later. Otherwise, what's the point? But at the same time, you can definitely oversaturate yourself and put out too much music. And also show that you're not really allowing yourself time to take a break, to, really kind of take a step back, listen to what you've done so far and say, you know what? How do I evolve? How do I step it up? And I think that's something that Taylor's not really able to do right now because, it is just in the studio performing, in the studio performing, in the studio performing, this project to this project. There's no breaks. There's no breaks more than a few weeks. And a lot of musicians take years between their records. I was just making a video about an Estonian artist I love named Curly, and I was comparing her as sort of the antithesis of I was about to say Enya. Enya comes to mind too because Enya takes way too long. But Taylor Swift is sort of the opposite of some of these artists who, in my opinion, should be putting out more music. They're a little too lazy. I'm not going to throw that L word around because I'm the one to talk, right? It's not as easy as it looks to put out a record and write a song, okay? And of course, how do you get the money for it? Taylor has all the money in the world. She has all the resources in the world. But that is something a lot of other artists are not afforded. So it's not really fair to be comparing, but, as content creators, it's often what we do. As people who talk on the internet and feel like our opinions are important. But look, I do feel like Taylor is walking a fine line. And it's not just with the oversaturation of music and, of course, working too much with Jack Antonoff. I think she's a little overexposed right now. I think she's really walking that tightrope. It's phenomenal that the Eras movie is doing the success that it's doing. And I think that it was a phenomenal business decision and also a real sort of, at a time when we're dealing with Hollywood strikes and greedy studios, big studios in Hollywood, who are, dragging their feet on giving fair deals to actors and writers and workers in the industry. Taylor decided to completely bypass them and go straight to the movie theaters and say, let's cut a deal. I know that you really want people in your theaters right now. The movie theaters have been struggling. Let's cut the major studios out of the equation. I'm going to distribute this directly to you. And big studios are not happy. They're sort of like, how did we miss out on this? And especially looking at the box office, Taylor just dominated her opening weekend. And it was a no-brainer. I mean, she was a an event in the movie industry, which it's kind of it's no wonder Taylor's taking over every industry. She can sell merch, she can sell tickets, and she can sell albums like nobody else. And so it's a little sad that the NFL is starting to use her in their promotion. I think it's a little bit low. I think it's definitely feeding into something that could backfire on Taylor. And that's what I worry about, because keep in mind, my critiques of Taylor is not because I want to see her fail. It's just because I've seen this happen to other artists who get burnt out too easily or overexposed and the public turn on them. I also have my own opinions and feelings about it, and I will express them because it's my channel, and I will admit that I find the whole Travis Kelce relationship with Taylor to be a little overexposed. I think we all love that Taylor's a little bit more in the spotlight because with Joe Alwyn, she was so much kind of in a private sphere with that relationship. But I don't know, after like 1 week, I was like, oh, I am sick of hearing about the two. I mean, it sounds like they are really pursuing something serious, which I don't know. As soon as I heard about the rumors, I was like, I could see it. You know what's interesting? Travis Kelce is someone you wouldn't think he'd be on my radar, but I remember hearing about him a few years ago. And because I'm from Philadelphia and the Eagles are such a big thing in Philadelphia, his brother Jason plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. And so everyone, who's anyone in the Philly region knows who Jason Kelce is. Of course, we don't talk about Travis because he's Kansas City. But look at me talking about football on this channel. Never thought I'd see the day. No, but I'm just saying that it's funny. I mean, he did host SNL last year, so people are talking about it being a clout chasing relationship. I feel like he's already pretty famous. I don't know. I don't think either of them need a PR relationship, but at the same time, I wouldn't have been surprised. It seemed like at certain aspects that this was like the NFL wanted to, it was like a joint partnership. We get boosts for the NFL and we get boosts for Taylor's movie and her tour, which doesn't need a boost to begin with. It's selling astronomical numbers. It makes me really worried for Beyonce and her Renaissance film because there so far aren't really a lot of other movie events that can be compared to besides maybe Michael Jackson. I know they like to show his performances in theaters. But there hasn't really been a tour that has been broadcast in movie theaters that has generated this much revenue. And of course, in this kind of deal that Taylor struck. But Beyonce is right on her heels and she's not going to make as much money. And, Beyonce already, is behind Taylor in revenue from her world tour, even though Beyonce had fewer dates and is doing pretty well. I mean, come on, it's Beyonce and Taylor's world. We're not saying that Beyonce is flopping. We're just saying that in comparison to Taylor Swift, it's like, yikes. Taylor is just, I feel like it is a little bit like only one person can succeed. And as Taylor becomes so big, it's just like hard for everyone else. I hate to say that. It does feel a little bit like in so many of these spaces, we're seeing that. But that's nothing against Taylor. I think the thing about her that I think doesn't rub people the wrong way is that she is not, she's very humble. And I think that's always something that we've noticed from her is that she doesn't gloat. Even though when Cruel Summer went #1 and she was like, I'm so surprised, it was sort of like, girl, you dropped a remix at the precise moment. Your team and you know what you're doing. That was a surefire #1. There was no way you weren't getting #1. I mean, it is crazy that a 2019 song has blown up in 2023. I mean, Taylor is just, yeah, it's absolutely incredible. It's incredible. But I gotta be honest with you, Taylor needs to take a long break from the media and from being exposed, because I do think that if we this is becoming almost too much. It's a fine line. And I've heard a lot of other people say the same thing, even Taylor Swift fans. I know, it's hard to get, honest feelings about it as a stan because, you just always are going to care about what Taylor Swift is doing. But it's not normal for an artist to be working this much. And to be this exposed. I think that it's for long term not good. So I really do wonder, going into 2024, there's rumors that she's going to be in a Marvel movie. Mm-mm. I don't know. I don't think the movie space. We got to get other people, give them a chance. I don't think I've heard. I've not seen a lot of movies that Taylor has been in, but I definitely have heard and can attest from my own experience. I think Taylor would be a phenomenal screenwriter, um, but she's not an actress. And I can see her getting cameos and things because of her name, but I also kind of feel like Taylor's above that. So yeah, no, it seems like every time we think that Taylor might potentially hit a roadblock, she succeeds, and I think that she will always kind of make smart choices. I think this movie deal was just a brilliant way of making a statement to the studios, but also helping out movie theaters, and of course herself making a kick ton of money. It's like an insane amount of money. So it's pretty epic. And I do plan on seeing the Eras Tour movie. I do wonder what streaming service is going to pick it up. Because right now there's a bidding war for it, and I do feel like really Taylor's angle should be releasing it on physical media first. Again, that's a way to sort of stick it to the streaming giants and say, hey, my fans want physical media too, and I've seen a lot of fans talk about how they really want DVDs and Blu-rays. I would love to get a Blu-ray of the Eras Tour because I do think the Eras Tour is more interesting than any other tour she's done because it is a bit for everyone. I might not show my parents, for example, the Reputation era if I ever show it to them, but I can show them other parts of the show. And I have seen, the folklore section. I mean, yeah, some of the stage design, it's Taylor Swift here, okay? I mean, there are artists who are taking things to other levels conceptually, but for the kind of show that Taylor is going to give you, I think she does a damn good job of it. And I don't know, she knows how to work the stage. Even though she's not much of a dancer, she has a knack for it. I mean, I'm very interested to see Beyonce's Renaissance Tour movie as well. I will not be seeing either of these in theaters, by the way, but I mean, I think that there's room for both of them, and I'm not trying to like start anything, but I do think it's interesting the people who have seen both and their comparisons, the critiques, the positives, and the negatives. But I do wish that Debut got a proper section, which is another reason why I'm not entirely sure Debut is going to come out while the Eras Tour is running in Europe, because it doesn't even have a section. But at the same time, she's got to put it out at some point. I mean, a lot of people are talking about how Debut is going to be like an email. Like she's getting less and less, I mean, everyone thought 1989 would have a huge campaign. And it's actually been kind of slow for her. But I think she's just too busy. I think she's got too much going on. When Red came out, she didn't have a lot going on. But right now, I mean, she's getting ready to go back on tour. She just put out a movie 2 weeks before this. She is in a high-profile relationship, and she's probably working on another studio album and working on re-recordings. I mean, she doesn't... At best, she's going to give us another music video for this, which is insane that she can to begin with. I don't know how she finds the time. But I don't know. I sometimes feel like some of these songs, there's evidence of how rushed they are, at least in the production. But, I won't go too far into the paint here. I wanted this to be a mostly positive video. I definitely think it's a choice to end with Karma. I feel like Midnight's, you know how I feel on that record. I feel like ending the tour with Midnight's makes sense because it's her most recent album. But at the same time, I don't know. Is it the most end of a tour kind of screaming album? I'm not sure. It's sort of more like a midway point for me. Yeah, I still think it's so admirable what Taylor is doing in this re-recording process. But I did want to bring up some developments today that I saw in the news about record labels becoming a lot more strict about their contracts with new artists, and in particular, giving them ultimatums and guidelines, basically saying they can't do what Taylor is doing as easily going forward. They're pushing the dates of possible re-recordings of their work under these record labels to 10 to 20 to even 30 years down the road, something that Taylor didn't have so much as a roadblock. She only had 5 years that she had to wait. And of course, most of her albums were over 5 years old by the time she even decided to re-record them. But record labels are catching on to this. They're seeing the success that Taylor is having. And I have to be honest, I do think that this could be a sort of unforeseen negative for the music industry that Taylor would, of course, not have foreseen potentially. That is a little bit unfortunate. I mean, again, I'm not saying it's her fault. I'm just saying it's interesting to sort of look at the big picture and think, gosh, record labels are really going to try and have the last word, aren't they? And that's one of the reasons why I really do feel, and we're seeing, in the Hollywood space right now, the major studios getting a lot of pushback, and unions, which is something the music industry could really use, trying to really take them to task. And maybe potentially seeing independent studios, you know, and take up the mantle and sort of break up Hollywood a bit. And I feel like the music industry needs this even more than Hollywood, and it's already pretty bad in both places. I really would love to see Taylor Swift start her own record label. I think after she finishes the re-recording process, I think a real kind of impactful change, not just the re-recordings, would be for her to start her own record label and sort of work towards creating, more equitable contracts and record deals for young artists, because that's where the change really needs to happen. Taylor has a lot of resources that a lot of other indie artists and upcoming artists don't have. And so I hope that Taylor is paying that forward, because it is unfortunate that this actually could inadvertently make it a lot harder for other artists to do on some of these major record labels what Taylor Swift is doing moving forward. So that's unfortunate. I felt like I did need to bring it up. I mean, again, I think the real enemy of the record labels, the greedy record labels, the men, often men in power, who take advantage of young artists who, let's be honest, people are like, well, then they just shouldn't sign a contract. If you don't sign any contracts, you're not going to get any exposure. You're not going to get any success. Like, I mean, especially in the time when Taylor was growing up in the industry, there was no other way. There was no other way to make it in the industry without signing record deals like this. And hers was rather good compared to some other artists and their horror stories. But still, there weren't a lot of options, and there still aren't. It's a little better today because everyone has better access to recording their own music, and crowdfunding has become more of a thing. But it's really hard to get any sort of traction if you're not signed to a major label. And so telling people that they just shouldn't sign contracts is basically saying, well, then you shouldn't go in the music industry. You shouldn't even try. And I mean, I do think it's important to have, realistic expectations when you're trying to get into a field like that. But I also don't think that that's the right take. I think that, we need to work to try and make better contracts for artists, but we shouldn't shame people who, that was their only option. I mean, they did, become successful thanks to a lot of these, contracts, but they still, just because, there was some success, doesn't mean that they should be trapped in them. If it's very unfair and kind of nefarious kind of practice, and especially people signing things under the age of 18. I think that's somewhere where I do kind of like, that's a bit more of an issue. So yeah, I don't know. The music industry isn't going to be fixed overnight, and I do really hope that this doesn't set us back a huge amount. But it is a sad development here. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on Speak Now and 1989. Have you seen the Eras Tour movie? What do you think of Taylor and Travis? Of course, Everyone wants to talk about Taylor and Joe. It is very sad that they broke up. I myself included thought they were endgame. I really did. Just because, 7 years, I mean, for Taylor, I mean, for me, it would be a big deal. And I'm sure it was for her. But I mean, 2023 really did a number on a lot of celebrity relationships. So most weren't immune. Most were not immune. And who knows, I mean, with Taylor and Travis, it's too soon to say. But I definitely will be making at some point a tier ranking video where I rank every single Taylor Swift song like I've done for other artists. I wanted to wait until the re-recordings were done because I felt like that would be a good time to do it. So maybe in 2024, like I said, there's a possibility that we get both Reputation and Debut. Taylor Swift, her self-titled album in 2024. And I could see her just wanting to be done with it. But I also could see her doing a similar pattern where we don't get any next year and then we wait a year and instead we have an entirely new album. I mean, I do think breaking it up is good, gives us variety, because if you start to get like very predictable and you're giving us the same thing every 4 months, it can contribute to the fatigue and the oversaturation. So I'm torn on whether I think Reputation TV should drop in January, like I know a lot of Swifties think. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. What do you think Taylor's plans are for the future? When is she going to finally take a serious break? And what were your favorite Vault tracks from both of these records? I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope it was not too harsh if you're a Swiftie. Like I said, I'm anti Jack Antonoff. I am not anti Taylor Swift. And even though, I mean, Jack has done phenomenal work with Lana Del Rey, so I can't completely, and he has some good songs with Taylor, but I'm getting really sick of his production. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna be real. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. I'll check out any Taylor Swift reviews of mine that you're interested in. Please give this a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you are new. Peace, love. See you all in my next video. Peace, love, and light. Bye.